Hello everybody, it's Delos here. Wanted to do a real brief introductory kind of intermediate Magicka Nightblade guide. There are tons of advanced guides out there, and we're just talking to some folks and kind of some of those questions around, how do you level it up? How do you get to kind of that end game state? So if you're trying to join a Trials guild that wants 70k DPS or 80k DPS, how do you get from where you are to there? Particularly if you were kind of like me and sort of capped out at the 15 20k range when you sort of started looking at DPS. There's a pretty long road to hoe to get to those higher numbers. So if you can already pull 50 60k DPS, there's probably not going to be anything in this guide that's terribly useful to you. But if you don't, we'll hopefully get you up to that level. So we're going to talk about several things, just kind of the class in general, some of the skills, some of the things to watch for when leveling, and then hopefully end it with a parse that will get us somewhere in the 60k range, so you can kind of get a sense for how to get to that point, and then to move up from kind of that 40, 50, 60k range up into the 80s, 90s, 100s, which is kind of the peak right now. You want to look at guides like on liko.gg, liko.gg. They have some great kind of end game parses that use trial gear and stuff like that. So this is going to be a little bit more tuned to gear you can get in overland content and in regular dungeons. So sort of a again kind of this intermediate guide. So races Khajiit right now, you can obviously, other than very very end game, you could pretty much go with any race. Dark Elf is great. Khajiit is really good right now because of in the Flames of Ambition there was a nerfed crit overall, so you get a little bit of passive crit with Khajiit, which is really nice. You could, Breton or Altmer are also great choices. Any of the Magicka races, would be fine to run a Magblade. So let's talk a little bit about the skills, particularly kind of how you level them up. So one of the challenges with Magblade, as well as with some others, is that a lot of the key skills are pretty deep in the tree. So as you level up, you want to keep one skill from each of these trees, Assassination, Shadow, and Siphoning, on each of your bars, just so the stuff kind of grows organically. For weapons, there has been a change in this Flames of Ambition patch where dual wield daggers is considered pretty highly because of this passive right here. Twin Blade and Blunt, so each dagger increases your critical chance rating by 812. Again, since crit kind of got nerfed across the board, people are seeing really good results with dual wield daggers. So when I leveled this guy recently, I actually leveled him with daggers on the front bar and an Inferno staff on the back bar, just to kind of keep both skills leveled. I think, for the average player, I don't think there's a lot of difference, particularly if you're someone, having daggers in the front bar is going to require you to stay in melee range, is going to reduce some of your mobility. So 99.9 times out of 100, you'll probably be fine just going with dual Inferno staves. So let's look at some of the skills briefly, right? So out of the Assassination tree, this Incapacitating Strike is a very nice ultimate. We can use it a lot. Again, it requires to kind of be in melee range. It has a 7-meter range. But when it's slotted, you get a huge boost to your sustain on light attacks. You kind of see that at the bottom. And then when you cast it, it gives you 20% damage for 6 seconds, which is very nice. Impale you get pretty early, but oddly enough, it's really just an execute skill, right? So it deals 300% more damage to enemies below 25 health. This is really where Magblades shine. This is one of the best executes in the game. It has a tremendous range too, 28 meters, so you can do a lot of damage on anything that's under 25% health using this Impale. And you'll see kind of when we do the parse that as we get to the end of the boss's health, we'll switch to almost exclusively using this skill, and there's some big numbers will pop up there. Merciless Resolve is a key part of the Nightblade toolset. The problem is, obviously, you don't get it until you're down at kind of at the skill 42 out of 50 on Assassination. But it's an interesting skill. By itself, it increases your critical damage, but every 5th light attack, it converts to something called Assassin's Will, and you'll see the icon change. And when you fire that, it deals a tremendous amount of damage, and actually heals you as well, depending on your distance from the target. So this is really the bread and butter of the rotation of the Magblade, and why a lot of people say it's so difficult. Although frankly, casting shocks with Warden or casting blast bones with a Necro is kind of the same thing, right? Every 5 light attacks, you have to do this skill to get optimal damage. Shadow, this is really where a lot of our soloing ability comes in, and where I contend that Magblades get a lot more XP per hour because you can just skip trash packs, you can invis all over the place. And what we do here is we have these two skills, right? Shadowy Disguise, which only lasts 3 seconds. You have to spam it. It's kind of a little bit of a pain from that perspective, but it makes it permanent. You can basically have permanent invisibility. Concealed Weapon makes you move faster while you're invisible or sneaking. So I normally use an add-on like Dressing Room if you're on PC or Alpha Gear. So you notice here on this train and on my movement setups, I have Concealed Weapon and Shadowy Disguise slotted. When I'm actually, doing combat or soloing, I will have Siphoning Attacks and Dark Shade, which we'll talk about a little bit, right? Because these skills don't add anything to you in combat. I mean, it's fine for overland. You can just leave them slotted. But when you really need, a little extra bit of oomph, you'll want to have real skills in those slots as opposed to movement skills. So having something like Dressing Room or Alpha Gear to rapidly switch back and forth between them is really, really useful on a Magicka Nightblade. Twisting Path, great skill. It's just an AoE damage on the ground. And Dark Shade is fundamentally it's a pet. For 20 seconds you get a shade of yourself and it causes damage. So it's basically a dot, but it manifests as a pet. There's another morph that lets you teleport to it. This one just does a little bit more damage. So for DPS, you're going to want this Dark Shade morph. I kind of take all the passives here, right? There's a lot of interesting stuff where you just increase your Magicka recovery. This gives you a little bit of increasing your physical and spell resistance every time you cast a shadow ability. Increases your max health, which is nice. Increases duration of some of your spells. So, same on assassination, right? There's just a lot of interesting stuff in here. So if you can, take all the passives. There's really no reason not to. Siphoning is your healing tree primarily, and your sustain tree. So if you can run a Nightblade healer, you'll use a lot of these skills. The ultimate here, Soul Tether, I really like it a lot for soloing. It is an AoE stun and lifesteal, right? So you cast this, and particularly when you have large trash packs, they're all healing you as you do damage. So if you solo a world boss, for example, like Zal'Shim in Northern Elsewhere, that has a bad trash pack, or Wily Kiva, then as soon as the little ads pop out, you just blast them with this ultimate, and they end up healing you for a tremendous amount. So it's a really nice ultimate for soloing. Swallow Soul is your bread and butter, spammable when you're soloing. It's kind of like the Templar's Jazz, right? So it does damage and it heals you, so it's just a superb skill. Healthy Offering is primarily a healer skill. Crippling Grasp is just a straight up short-term dot. Siphoning Attacks, again, a little bit deep in the tree, but very important for us, right? This is our main sustain. So your light and heavy attacks will heal you and then restore Magicka, which is super nice. So you want to have this buff running all the time. Sap Essence is one of my favorites for soloing. You won't see it in the parse here, but again, I'm fortunate that it's a little bit deep in the tree, but again, for trash packs, this is an AoE lifesteal, and AoE damage, right? So you can just kind of spam this on trash packs and stuff dies as it's healing you, which is super convenient. Passives here, interesting when you get 20 ultimate when you drink a potion. So even if you just have trash potions from Overland, then you're going to gain ultimate by using them. So there's no reason, frankly, not to use them. You don't have to use the expensive potions. Just the kind of the trash essence of Magicka that you pick up are plenty good enough. Magicka Flood, you want to make sure you have a siphoning ability on your front and your back normally when you're questing. I don't believe I do have them both on the front bar here. So I will have one on each bar normally, because then it'll continue to increase your Magicka, and it'll increase your healing done. So all kinds of good stuff happen with these passives. For weapons, we talked a little bit already about dual wield. I can pretty much take this point back, right? You don't use any of the dual wield skills except for the passive at the bottom if you're going to go that route. On Destruction Staff, you could get the Destruction Ultimate if you wanted. I find especially if you're at range, if you can't get a melee range, you're going to want something like this Ultimate or the Mage's Guild Ultimate. I tend to use the Assassination and Siphoning ones, and for when I'm soloing. Unstable Wall of Elements is a key part of our back bar. And then Elemental Drain is great when you're soloing. It provides a little bit more Magicka steal. So if you're having sustain problems, this is great to put on larger bosses. It also gives major breach when you're by yourself, so we won't need it in the parse because this dummy that we're going to use already has breach on it, and we can do better stuff with our slots. And again, I kind of take all of these passives for destruction staff. It just improves your damage. Armor in the current patch, 7 light is the way to go, so you just want to take as many of these passives as you can. This one just affects your effectiveness of snares on you, and I don't really see a huge reason to invest in it early on. But the rest of these are pretty good passives. And now it used to be that you'd take 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy for the Undaunted passive, but as of the Flames of Ambition patch, 7 light is really the way to go. Up here you have annulment. I don't have it morphed yet, but this is actually a nice damage shield. So if you're having trouble soloing, annulment and its harness Magicka morph are really nice abilities to add to your tool set there. In the world, really don't have anything going on here that affects us from a DPS perspective. We're really leveling this kind of as you want. Leisure Demand is very nice, obviously, for kind of popping chests quickly, etc., and pickpocketing if you're going to do real kind of roguey type stuff. The easiest way to level this up is by selling and laundering stolen goods in the Thieves Guild. In terms of guild skills, again, if you're going to play kind of an assassin, at least getting Dark Brotherhood, the first quest gives you this Blade of Woe, which allows you to assassinate folks, which is a lot of fun if you're going to play that kind of character. From the Fighters Guild, interestingly, you may need this Barb Trap, again, unfortunately, all the way down at Fighters Guild 8, but you can level that pretty quickly, either by doing the main quest line in Cold Harbor, or by doing dolmen runs, like in Alakir Desert, for example. So the reason for that is this provides minor force buff. So unless you're running the Medusa set, when you're parsing, this is one buff that is not provided to you as part of the trial dummy. So you would have to provide that yourself. So if you're parsing with a different set of armor, you probably want to use the skill, or you're just kind of giving up some damage. On the Mages Guild, some interesting stuff here. Again, you have to get Mages Guild to 10 to get their ultimate, which is Meteor, but it's a very nice ultimate, again, for a ranged build. Inner Light is very nice. It gives you just kind of a passive increase to your max Magicka. And you get Major Prophecy for spell crit, but I believe that's also provided by the dummy, so it's not as huge a deal. Degeneration is a kind of a nice dot to add. Again, if you're soloing, it adds a nice major sorcery buff, which you would get from this trial dummy as well, but it's just a nice dot to have. Some nice passives in the Mages Guild. I'll let you explore those at your leisure. Sigil Order, unfortunately, on this character, I haven't leveled enough. There are some things of interest here in Sigil Order, primarily this Imbue weapon. It is a nice damage spammable, which will actually probably do more damage than Swallow Soul, right? So this would be a nice one for parsing. We'll take an alternative that we'll talk about in just a second. Channeled Acceleration provides the same buff as Barb Trap, that minor force, but unfortunately it's a long cast. It's a 1.5 second. Well, this is its instant. I believe the morph that Channeled Acceleration is a 1.5 second cast, which is kind of a colossal pain. If you do use Imbue Weapon as your spammable, you would want to take Spell Orb, which every 5 spell charges, which is every time you do the Sigil ability. So basically every 5 casts, you're going to get a little bit of extra damage. So that's free damage right there. Nothing in the Thieves Guild. In Undaunted, I really want to talk about Necrotic Orb, right? So if you don't want to use Degeneration from the Mages Guild, this Necrotic Orb is pretty nice as in kind of AoE or single target damage. So you don't really see that in fights, as a sustain item, you can activate the synergy, but it's actually pretty nice damage. I think I haven't morphed it yet, we probably want the Mystic Orb morph of this. Alliance War, in case you haven't noticed, the only thing that's changed is you don't need rapid maneuvers anymore. You can get this continuous attack to make your horse gallop, so that's relatively interesting. Racial, you never want to take all your racial skills. Khajiit one, this is the killer one right here, right? It's Feline Ambush, which increases your critical damage and healing. So those are the skills. So what we're going to do for our parse here is, we could do it with Swallow Soul. Might actually use instead Concealed Weapon. Just kind of a nice spam. It really doesn't matter what your spammable is. Swallow Soul, Concealed Weapon, or Imbued imbued weapon from Sigil Order are all great spammables. That's probably not where your DPS loss is going to be. So again, we'll go over our setup. There's our Execute as Impale. There's our spammable Concealed Weapon, Short-Term Dot, Crippling Grasp, Merciless Resolve, which is our proc, and then we just have the passive Inner Light. And our ultimate will be Incapacitating Strike. On the back bar, we will have Twisting Path for AoE, Unstable Wall of Fire again for AoE. This guy explodes at the end, so you don't want to refresh it too soon. You want to let it explode, and we'll see that when we do the parse. Degeneration, a little bit longer term dot. So one thing that's interesting is 12 seconds, and 10 seconds, right? So these three are probably going to refresh. You can refresh them in sequence. And then here's our pet, Dark Shade, and our Sustained Siphoning Attack. Both of these are 20 seconds, right? So we'll be able to try and refresh these as a block. We want to kind of have a counter because every 5th light attack, we want to be hitting this Merciless Resolve. Let's talk about attributes. 64 in Magicka. No reason not to do that. So we have a pretty nice spell critical here, 85.7%, which is kind of the key number we're going for. We are using the Thief Mundus right now. So the Shadow was the hotness until the last patch. The Thief has taken it over. The Shadow increases your crit damage. Thief increases your crit percentage. So if your crit percentage is pretty high already, you could switch to the Shadow. I'm not sure exactly where the cutoff is, frankly. If you're soloing, you really want the Lover. It increases your penetration, and by yourself, you're not getting any boons to penetration really. So the Lover is going to actually do more damage than any of the other Mundus stones. Let's talk about consumables, right? So for parsing, and we're going to be using Ghastly Eyeball, which is really good sustain. It increases Magicka and recovery, but it doesn't have a health component, right? So that's a little bit of a problem when you're out in the world trying to solo stuff. You can use Witchmother's Potent Brew, has a little bit of health, or if you're not sustained constrained, you could use something like Salted Salmon Millet Soup, which does health and Magicka, which is pretty nice. Let's talk about gear briefly. So monster sets, you could use a monster set like Maw the Infernal. I don't tend to like that pet too much. Right now in this patch, 2 crit is a pretty good combination. So we have Iceheart Epaulets and Grundwolf's Guise, which anything that gives you crit on the one item are pretty nice combinations. When you're soloing, you might sacrifice one of your monster slots and instead slot Ring of the Pale Order, which gives you extra healing on top of what you already get kind of as a Magblade. So if you're trying to solo vets in particular, vet dungeons, that might be a good idea. We are also using Mother's Sorrow, which is an overland set from Deshawn. Again, this is kind of the hotness from a crit perspective. It's all crit. And now Medusa, which is also, as you see, kind of all crit. And there we get the minor force buff all the time. So we do not need to slot Barb Trap with this particular setup. So we have Medusa on the staff and weapons. Now, I'm sorry, on the staff and jewelry. So this used to be a bad idea, right? Because then when you switch to your back bar where we have the Maelstrom's Inferno staff, you would lose the minor force buff from Medusa. It turns out that it's preferable now to run it this way because the other way to run it would be to run it on weapon and weapon jewel on 2 body, but it's a heavy armor set, so you could put it on 2 body pieces. But right now the benefit of having 7 light outweighs the loss of the minor force buff on the back bar. So you can experiment around with whatever works for you. Other sets that may be of interest that I run, Burning Spellweave I tend to like a lot. It has a proc effect, so you don't lose this 5th bonus when you go to your back bar, so that's pretty nice. Burning Spellweave plus Mother's Sorrow is a nice combination. But there's clearly a lot of sets in the game that can be useful. Now, as you get into trials, there are others like Sorori and False Gods that people recommend highly, but this is really focused on pre-trial. So these are very eminently achievable sets. You don't really have to do anything special. You can get a lot of this gear out of normal dungeons, and if you're a crafter, just kind of improve it yourself. So that's the overview of the Magblade. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about parsing, show a couple of parses. We'll expand a little bit on what I was talking about earlier, since we recorded that. clarify a little bit on this spammable for the Sigil Order Elemental Weapon. Now, you get it at Sigil rank 3, but really, if you're going to use it as your DPS spammable for parsing, you are going to want to go higher in the Sigil Order to get these 2 spell orb passes, right? Because that is a huge component of the damage. It's just kind of free damage that comes with Elemental Weapon, and then also Clairvoyance reduces the cost of your spammable, which will be a big effect on your sustain. So if to really kind of do higher end damage, you're going to use Elemental Weapon, you're going to want to get higher in the Sigil Order. You can, of course, use one of the other spammables we discussed, right? So we can either use Concealed Weapon from Shadow or Swallow Soul. So those are kind of your major choices. If you go Vampire, you can use Blood for Blood. That kind of has mixed results and fell a little bit out of favor since the last patch. So we're going to use Harry and Megan here. I don't know if those are actually their names, to help us demonstrate the rotation. So this is going to be, when people talk about their DPS online, you see these numbers in the 90 to 100K range, they're talking about using this Iron Atronach, the trial dummy. He automatically gets a lot of debuffs that you would have in a full trial group, and he drops some synergies, etc. So that's normally what folks are talking about when you see those higher numbers, and when somebody asks you to parse, this is probably the dummy that they're going to want you to use. A lot of guild houses will have it. It's a little bit expensive, I think, at around 6,000 crowns. So core to the rotation, and let's talk about a couple of things. One is when you're in Overland, and again, I have a lot of different loadouts for different stuff that I'm working on. But when you're in Overland, I normally flip back and forth between kind of this movement mode. Again, we talked about earlier where we have Shadowy Disguise and Concealed Weapon to help our movement and help us invis through stuff. And I have this AoE Soul Tether. AoE Lifesteal, which is super nice for just kind of overland grinding. But really, overland mobs, except for world bosses and some of the higher end mobs, are going to melt pretty fast, or are going to come in packs. So you're normally going to have 2 approaches when you're leveling up and doing the overland stuff. You're probably going to open up with something like Unstable Wall of Elements and or Twisting Path. Then switch to your front bar, and if you're working a trash pack, you're probably just going to spam Sap Essence until everything's dead. If you don't have it yet, you would use Swallow Soul on individual targets until they're dead. You may or may not want to run Merciless Resolve when you're just doing overland content. If you fight a little bit harder boss, or if you're doing a dragon in Elsewhere or another world boss or something like that, you are going to want to do it because it is a big part of your DPS component. So normally what I'll do is, if I'm just kind of cruising through the Overland, I'll be in this movement mode that'll have my Shadowy Disguise and Concealed Weapon, and then just real quick I'll switch to one of my either PvE Soul or Train Soul. Really the differences here are just gear. I run a training set because we're kind of in the middle of grinding CP in this expansion. But I'll switch to real quick with one of these loadouts to get more useful skills on the back bar if I'm dealing with a little bit harder content. So when you get to a boss, and if you're soloing a dungeon, for example, you can breeze through all the trash packs using these skills, and then right before you get to a boss, just kind of pause, switch your loadout, and then you're ready to fight a boss. I've also got the Ring of the Pale Order. I'm not sure if we talked about it earlier or not, but Ring of the Pale Order is a nice mythic item that contributes additionally to your healing. So if you're doing stuff like soloing vet dungeons, then that adds a lot of healing that will help you a ton. Also, if you're soloing, I'm wearing the Ice Heart's mask right now. The Ice Heart shoulders. But if you get the 2-piece Ice Heart, which sometimes is in the Golden Vendor and Cyrodiil, or you can do the dungeon for it, you'll get a damage shield every time you deal critical damage. So this is a big survivability, as you do things like learn Veteran Maelstrom Arena and things like that. Magblades already have a lot of healing, but Ice Heart adds a lot of extra oomph, and Ring of the Pale Order will add oomph on top of that. So we have a lot of defensive capabilities available to us. So now we're going to talk about light attack weaving, and there's videos out there that talk about this much better than I do, and certainly there's folks who do it way better than I do. But to just kind of get you started, as if you're starting to move from say the 20k DPS range and you want to move up into the 40s and 50s, it's almost certainly has to do with your light attack weaving. And we talked a little bit about this concept of it being sort of like a heartbeat every 1 second. You want to do click skill, click skill, click skill. So as you begin working up into that, you just want to kind of get the tempo go, maybe with just spamming light attacks on a target dummy. So notice this guy only has 6 million damage. I'm not using him because I'll use him for the full parse. But you can go to any target dummy, and there's some, I think it's a free one you can get from a quest in Clockwork City. And first, just kind of start getting the tempo for your light attacks. Right? I mean, you can spam them as fast as you want. The question is your light attack count going up or not? So you can only do one skill per second. So really what you want to do is maybe start working in your main spammable, which for us right now is elemental weapon. So we're going to do that, right? So it's going to be click, skill, click, skill, click, skill. And see right in the middle of my screen, that's combat metronome. So the idea is it's counting my 1 second global cooldown. So when it goes red, we want to be getting ready to hit the other skill. So it's like, click skill, click skill, click skill. If your timing is off, then your light attack won't count up. And actually my light attack helper is not in a helpful mode right now. When you have light attack helper installed, let's see where that is. We want to see the counter itself. So we want to see the light attacks per second. So let's try that again. Click skill. So as you see in the upper right hand corner, we're normalizing 1.13 or 1.10. We want that number to be as close to 1 as possible. If you're going, if you're doing higher than 1, you're over light attacking, and some of those are getting eaten. So the objective is, you can kind of see me, if you don't see me start to cast, then we're going to need to regen a little bit of Magicka, so I should consume a potion for that. So what your objective is to cancel the light attack animation with your skill. So you should actually see yourself start to cast, and then immediately do your skill. So if you don't interrupt it, you get that full animation. If you do interrupt it, it just does. You should still see the fireball hit the mob. If your timing is off, then it's possible that you're going too fast or too slow. So there, I'm kind of at 0.95, which is, it's okay when you're doing a single skill. You can kind of get into the groove. This is really to learn the timing, but you're going to want to use all your skills when you're doing an actual parse. So the way things normally work is you're really managing sort of 4 things when you're parsing. And hopefully, we'll get a 50 or 60,000 K parse when we do this for real. But we're managing a number of things, right? Or at least 4 things. We're managing our long-term dots and buffs. So now we're talking about siphoning attacks. We're talking about dark shade, things that last kind of 20 seconds plus, 12 seconds. We're managing our short-term buffs. So, crippling grasp, and again on the back, we have some 10-second dots and buffs. We have a spammable, right, which is what we want to do kind of every second. And then we have our execute. So it's kind of managing that whole rotation of trying to make sure that all of your dots stay up as close to 100% as possible, all of your buffs stay up as close to 100% as possible, while executing 1 light attack and 1 skill every second. And then, obviously our next thing to manage is this merciless resolve. So we're going to demonstrate that right now. So sometimes there's a problem for me at least, with it not counting up. So we are going to cast the buff. So it's a 40-second buff. It lasts a long time. And then we're going to just start. Okay, so it is counting up. So every time I do a valid light attack, it counts up. You saw I counted up to 5. And now I have my Assassin's Will, that's the bow, ready to go. So every 5th light attack, you want to fire that bow off. So here we go. 1, 2. Nope, see, I said it didn't count up. And then at 4, you want to do 1 more light attack and fire. You might have to wait just a scoosh between when you, I missed it again. That's the main loss of DPS for me, I think, is kind of missing that light attack wave. And then when it's about to run out, you want to make sure that it stays up. And then you got to wait for it to turn blue. So it's almost a tiny little hesitation between 4 and 5. 3, 4, click, and 5. So that's the mechanic behind Merciless Resolve. Every 5th attack, every 5th light attack, you want to come back to the front bar and make sure you're firing off that bow as soon as possible. I think that's about it for talking about rotations in general. So we're going to try this full parse on the 21 million and see how we do. I won't narrate it because frankly I don't have enough concentration to do them both, but it's going to be exactly what we just showed. Well, maybe I'll show it a little bit slower over here first. So I'm just kind of get into the rotation over here and do it a little bit slower so we can talk about it, right? So we'll start siphoning strikes, we'll bring our pet up, start merciless resolve, and then light attack skill, light attack skill, light attack skill, light attack skill, and then we're at 5, fire the bow. Bring that dot up. Now we're using our spammable because everything is running. The back bar is about to run out. Switch to the back bar. Light attack skill, light attack skill, light attack skill. There we're at 5, fire it off. These two ended, so bring them up. 3, dot, and 5. Light attack skill, back bar is ending. 1, 2, 3, 4, and light attack skill. There's our bow. Everything's still running in the back bar, so we just use our spammable. We do our short buff. We renew our merciless resolve. We never want to let it expire. Everything on the back bar is off, so we'll do actually all 5 here. Oh, see, I must have missed the light attack. So if you come back to the front and the light attack count is not 5, you've missed something. Okay, so we're out of Magicka because we're not doing kind of full sustain rotation, etc. But that's the basic idea, right? So we keep our dots and our buffs on our back bar going. Every 5th light attack, we want to come back to the front bar. When you're not doing anything else, when everything else is running, you want to use your spammable, which is elemental weapon for us at number 2 skill. And you can put these wherever you want in your bars, or whatever's more comfortable for you. You don't have to be married to a particular way of doing it. Okay, so let's try this on the 21 million, and maybe just have a little pause here in case I screw up, and I can shamelessly edit in a better parse. Okay, here we go. So buff up, and here we go. There was a synergy, so that's one of the things that the dummy brings to us, right? Is it's like a Templar dropping shards. Up that synergy doesn't actually count against your timer, right? You can hit that X button anytime you want. So you could theoretically use a potion, take a synergy, swap bars, all inside kind of the 1 second allotment that you have. Missing a lot of light attacks. Always keep an eye on the percentage health of the target. As we get close to 25%, we'll switch to execute mode. Refresh all 5 on the back bar. 27. Oops, I let that drop off. We don't want to let that drop off. At 25, we just replace number 2 with number 1, and we no longer consume the bow. We will always just use our impale. I also stopped using siphoning strikes. We don't really need the sustain, right? We're almost at the end of the thing. Oops, I consumed it by accident because I'm an idiot. Somewhere between 10 and 5%, you're going to want to stop casting your dots and just use your impale. One more time on the dots. Make sure your pet stays up. He's a pretty good damage dealer. And now I'm under 5, so just going to spam. Always light attack spam. You're going to see pretty nice big numbers pop up there. And that's it. Okay, so right at 60k, not as good as I had hoped, but not an awful parse. Some trial dungeons want to see you do 70k, and so let's talk about what that would take, right? And so certainly trial gear will help a little bit, but really ESO is less gear dependent than almost every other MMO. It truly is about skill. So I'm running the combat metrics add-on, which has a lot of interesting insights about what kind of happened here, right? So here's some interesting stuff, right? Light attack is our primary source of damage, which is we kind of expect, followed by twisting path, and our 2 big hitters, impale and assassin will. So that's pretty much on target. You can kind of make sure that your buffs are up. Like if we weren't running Medusa, we'd want to see our minor force up here through using barb trap. You can see your critical percentage, 80s and 90s. That's pretty good. Max hit, 70k. There's some builds that I've done that have hit 100k with impale and assassin's will, which is really sweet. But I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, right? It's total DPS that you're concerned with. Some interesting statistics here. So this kind of shows you your front and your back bar, like how much attack. And this tells you how many times you missed a light attack before using that skill. So I actually missed a lot of light attacks right before renewing Merciless Resolve. I lost a total of 51 seconds because I didn't weave as efficiently as possible. Our weaving average was 0.16. You're going to see, the top end players, this is going to be like 0.07, 0.08. So, clearly a lot of room for me to improve. I did not have Backstabber slotted up here. That's probably, contributed a little bit perhaps. And then let's see, what did we do from a light attacks perspective? 0.68, so really not too good. I missed a lot of light attacks. Getting that into the 0.8, 0.9 range is going to be your biggest source of DPS increase. So, that's kind of it. So hopefully it's kind of an example of how you can move, without needing trial gear, which is kind of basic overland sets, move up and start getting into that 50, 60k DPS range. So hope this was helpful.